This video is part 1 of a 2-part series about the nitrogen fertilizer management tool for California wheat. In this first part, I will introduce the tool and walk through the different features of the full version of the tool and how to use them. What you see is a landing page of the nitrogen fertilizer management tool for California wheat. From here, you can navigate to an About page that gives some background information about the tool and the different field techniques and measurements used in the tool. There are also several links to resources with a lot more information. If you have more questions than the resources can answer or have comments or feedback, you can fill out the feedback form. You can also always navigate to this form from the top right-hand corner of the tool. Here you can also see an info button that has even more information about the data used and the people involved in creating this tool. Then there are also the links to the actual tools, a full version and a light version. The full version helps give the user context for the field conditions before asking for field information, while the light version jumps right into taking the user's information and turning that into a nitrogen fertilizer recommendation. To show the full capacity of this tool, I'm going to use an example of an actual field that used this tool to make fertilizer decisions during spring 2021. The first step is entering the field location. The map will locate you if you have geolocation turned on, or you can manually navigate to a field of interest. You can choose anywhere in the state of California, but some information is limited to the main wheat-growing regions, the unshaded ones on the map. More information will be required from you if you are not in one of these regions, such as the growth stage of the plants. You can click or drag the marker to a location of interest. You can also put a set of coordinates or even an address in the search bar. Note that the map behaves like a regular Google map and allows you to switch to satellite view to help locate the place of interest. Next, you'll want to enter the period of interest. Typically, this means the planting date to date of interest for a nitrogen fertilizer recommendation. The example field was planted on November 18th, and we were making our first nitrogen fertilizer recommendation on January 25th. The field was a triticale field planted with NS Swift 77. As you can see, there are many crop varieties to choose from, and if you are unsure of the variety in your field, you could always choose the general crop type. Next, you'll want to enter the irrigation questions. Irrigation at the beginning of the season is used in conjunction with precipitation to estimate when germination occurred, so make sure the dates are accurate. The example field was planted into enough moisture to start seed germination, and it was first irrigated on November 29th with 7 inches of irrigation. When these boxes are fully filled out, click Next. This will check that all the information meets the requirements, and then pull the weather and soil data for the site and date range specified. On the second page, you will see summaries of seasonal precipitation and nitrogen uptake. The box at the top have a summary over the dates specified, not including any forecast, of the total water and percent nitrogen uptake estimated. The first graph shows percent total nitrogen uptake and precipitation for the current season in comparison to a 10-year historical average. The second graph shows seasonal water, including any irrigation entered in inches. The graphs are interactive. You can hover over the lines to see the data behind them. You can also click on the lines in the legend to remove them and look at the subset of lines. You have the ability to zoom into areas of interest and then auto-scale back easily. You can also download these plots as PNG files for outside use. If you want to look more closely at the data used to make these graphs, you can press Download CSV. On the right, you will see an estimate of growth stage. This is based off the planting date, the estimation of germination, and the growing degree days over the time period specified. If the growth stage model is incorrect for the field in question, adjust the slider to what represents the most advanced growth stage that 50% of plants in the field have reached. Adjusting this slider will also adjust the graphs and nitrogen uptake summary. Note that recommendations for nitrogen fertilizer are only accurate between 2.5 and 10.3 on the Feek scale. A warning will pop up if you are outside of those limits. On the next page, you'll want to input the site-specific measurements you have taken. You can still explore the tool without having taken these measurements, but the recommendations may be inaccurate for your field. At least one crop reflectance measurement has to be taken. We took site-specific measurements at the example field, and those included a crop canopy measurement and a soil nitrate N measurement. After indicating which measurements were taken, you will want to adjust the growth stage sliders to differentiate when the measurement was made and when the nitrogen fertilizer application is planned for. You can enter a growth stage directly or use the calendar to get the app to estimate a growth stage at a certain date. The reflectance measurements of crop canopy have to be expressed as a sufficiency index, or SI. As with many of these boxes, if you are unfamiliar or unsure about what you should enter here, click the Info I. This box explains that a sufficiency index is a ratio of the measurements taken from the broader field to the measurements taken in an N-rich zone. There's even a calculator that you can use to calculate the ratio and a link to a blog post to learn more about taking these measurements. Our measurements in the example field indicated an average SI of 0.95. Next, you'll want to enter your soil nitrate quick test pad value and indicate if you performed the test with a calcium chloride solution or just water. More information about conducting this test can be found by clicking the Info button. We found an average of 1 ppm on the soil nitrate quick test in the top foot using a calcium chloride solution at the example field. The soil nitrate quick test will be automatically converted to a lab value and fertilizer equivalent. Alternatively, if you had a lab value instead of a quick test value, you could manually adjust the lab value slider. Once you have entered these measurements, click Next. On this page, the tool asks for a reasonable yield estimate and protein goal. Yield and protein estimates should be based on previous outcomes from the field in question, along with considerations related to the current season, such as whether the current crop stand and environmental conditions are similar to a typical season, or are better or worse than average. The nitrogen budget will be determined based on the yield and protein estimate. Therefore, using a realistic estimate here is important for getting an accurate fertilizer recommendation. In the example field, the yield estimate was 7,800 pounds per acre, but since it was a triticale seed field, there was a low protein goal. Next, the tool asks for an amount, if any, of pre-plant nitrogen fertilizer. You will adjust the slider if needed. There is no pre-plant fertilizer applied in the example field. On the final page, you'll get a recommendation for a nitrogen fertilizer application. For the example field, it was 90 pounds of nitrogen per acre. This is shown in the dark blue box. The in-season nitrogen rate recommended for yield optimization indicates the lowest rate of nitrogen fertilization needed to achieve a yield that is statistically equivalent to the maximum. The amount of expected yield and protein increase from this application are shown in the first interactive graph, along with the amount of uncertainty around these values. The second graph shows the nitrogen fertilizer response and expected yield. The colored points show the recommended nitrogen fertilizer amount for optimizing yield and protein yield, in the case that you are fertilizing to maximize both grain yield and protein content. You can also adjust the nitrogen amount slider to different rates to see how yield and protein response is expected. If you would like, then you can download a summary report that details the information entered and the final recommendation.